Welcome to Product Leaders, a podcast series by Orbis. I'm Ben Moulton.
I'm Thai Silvera. Great to be joining as a co-host finally.
We're back with a brand new season, more episodes, more guests, and a step up in the conversations we're having across the product pond.
We'll be speaking to product leaders from startups through to scale-ups and global teams, unpacking how they actually build, ship, and scale great products.
Our aim stays the same, to share insights that help those starting out in product,
and practical advice for those already in the thick of it, navigating the day-to-day challenges of the role.
So whether you're breaking into product or leading teams,
there should be something in here for you.
Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Product Leaders podcast. Today I'm joined by my colleague Thai Silvera, and we're speaking to Nick Sabharwal, VP of Product at Seekr.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks for having me. Nick has spent much of his career working in the intersection of AI and product, previously working on AI initiatives at Amazon across Prime Video and AWS. Today he leads at Seekr. He's in charge of the product division there, where he's responsible for product development, strategy, and design. Seekr are focused on building trustworthy and explainable AI systems. They're used in high-stake environments across sectors like government, defense, and highly regulated enterprises. On this episode, we'll talk a little bit about what it really means to build explainable AI, how Nick approaches product leadership in an AI company, and the differences between working in big tech versus a fast-moving scale-up.
So if you're interested in AI, product leadership, and how the role of product management is changing, it's a perfect storm to listen to this episode. Let's dive into the conversation with Nick. Nick, Thai, welcome to the podcast. Great to have both of you on. An exciting podcast for our guests, hopefully. It's the first time we've had this, three dynamic with me and Thai. So, we'll see how it goes, basically. I guess to kick things off, it'd be great just to have a quick intro from both of you. I guess for the context of the listeners, Thai is a colleague of mine at Orbis, and then Nick is the VP of Product for one of our clients, Seekr. Nick, do you want to go first? Just tell us a little about yourself, your background, and your journey towards Seekr, kind of problems that you're working on at the moment. It'd be great to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm Nick. I'm the head of product at Seekr. I lead product development, design, and product strategy for the company, and I've been there for about a couple of years now. I've been in AI for a while, and so very lucky to have been in AI product as early as 2018, kind of before the big LLM ChatGPT boom. So it's been about 7 years working in AI. A lot of that time was at Amazon, worked in Fire tablets, worked at Prime Video, worked at AWS AI for quite a bit. And then before that, I worked at a shipping company called Purolator, which you can kind of think as like a Canadian FedEx. So it's like the market leader there. Very excited to talk more about AI and about Seekr. A lot of the work we're doing right now is on explainable AI and sovereign AI. And I think that's obviously a very exciting topic with a lot of growth around it. And I hope we can give your listeners some full content.
For sure. No, that's great. Thanks, Nick. We're looking forward to diving into that in a lot more detail. And Thai, your first kind of feature on the podcast. Obviously, I know you well. But, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, cheers for having me. The famous podcast leaders, I'm glad to be on it. So I basically work adjacent to Ben, US focused product at all levels, mainly working seed stage to kind of Series C businesses, and spent quite a bit of time last year supporting Seekr amongst many, hence the relationship with Nick. Kind of focus on data, AI, ML, products, and also developer tools, and to a certain extent fintech. Mainly across New York and Austin.
Awesome. We're all introduced. Let's kick on. I guess, Nick, where I kind of wanted to start was just it'd be really interesting, I suppose, just to set the scene for the listeners, right, on what's who Seekr are. And I think a nice way of doing that is maybe just what's the problem space that you guys are working in, what's the product you're building to solve it, and who are the customers, I suppose, just to really cleanly sort of understand that. Could you just talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, Seekr's an AI company. And our goal is to help mission owners and leaders make accurate, explainable decisions when the stakes are the highest. So from defense to telecom to finance, we really power the AI systems that those verticals, and in a lot of cases that society depends on. A big focus for the company is explainability and sovereign AI. And these things are possible with Seekr Flow, which is our flagship end-to-end AI operating system. And so with Seekr Flow, you can build domain-specific large language models and AI agents that offer those mission owners explainable, auditable, contestable outputs from their applications. In addition to building those mission-ready applications with Seekr Flow, you can also deploy the product and other Seekr products in the environment of your choice. So whether you want to run in our kind of SOC 2 certified SaaS environment, in your own private cloud, on-prem, in your own data center, deploy on an edge device, and really anywhere that you need secure and reliable AI, Seekr and Seekr Flow is probably a good fit for you.
Nice, yeah, that's great. Really sets the scene nicely. And obviously you joined at a pretty exciting time, right? When Seekr growing, obviously they're still massively going right now, but you're very much on that kind of upward trajectory. I guess I'm interested to find out when you first joined Seekr, to you, what felt like the most fragile, about the product or the business, just like an initial, when you initially joined, what were you kind of working on straight away, which felt most fragile?
So when I joined, we were just launching Seekr Flow. And so the company's background is very much in data lineage, data provenance, content scoring, and really just truth discovery. And that set the foundational stage, both in terms of IP, but also just culture for this product that we were building, Seekr Flow, that had that contestability and auditability and traceability built into the product from the beginning. And so I think in my first month, we kind of officially launched that product, and then it really became about finding customers, refining roadmap, and just helping the company through that growth phase. And so the company has doubled roughly since I've been here, and we'll probably go through a similar growth phase this year. And so, just handling a lot of those growing pains and bringing my experience in to, just create the systems, process, vision, et cetera, for the product that we needed at that time as product and the rest of the company grew.
Nice. So it's basically prioritizing the actual launch of Seekr Flow. That was kind of the main kind of priority when you first joined. Is that right?
Yeah, and really just creating a cohesive roadmap around the things that we wanted to be the best at. And so explainability, we launched with a pretty good value proposition, but just creating a picture of where that was going, evangelizing that inside the company, getting it worked into our roadmap, and essentially stitching it all together, making sure our sales teams understood what we were trying to build there, and also that we were listening to them, and that our marketing teams kind of knew how to speak to it, and vice versa, right? It was really just about setting the stage for the next couple of years when I joined. And then also this, we really kind of started with a really simple premise as a company. And it's that AI is going to be big. It's going to be everywhere. It's obviously going to be in a lot of consumer apps and low value use cases, but it's going to be used in critical use cases as well in these high stakes environments. And if that's the case, every decision made by an application needs to be transparent, auditable, and defensible. And so again, that early work forced us to build kind of rigorous provenance and traceability, and that DNA obviously underpins Seekr and Seekr Flow. And then the scale up phase has just really been about hardening that technology for real missions. And so turning all those research patents into highly functional products that solve customer pain, packing our product into secure and compliant, packaging it in secure and compliant ways so we can operate in all those different environments. A big focus for me coming from Amazon is just being customer focused, like meeting with customers at all levels of the industries we serve and making sure we're building solutions that really solve the issues they're facing day to day. And so those, I guess, were the fragile components, if you want to kind of refer to them that way. But the work has been incredibly rewarding. I think we officially became a unicorn last year, which is always really exciting. And then perhaps what's most rewarding for me is the degree to which our customers have trusted us to handle their most sensitive data, their most critical AI workflows. Since I've joined, we've become a partner and difference maker for a bunch of government organizations like the Army and the Navy, and then we've become pretty deeply embedded in a lot of critical enterprise workflows as well. And so that's been a big portion of the effort that I put into the company, and it's been nice to see it go quite well.
It's awesome. That's really good to hear. And I think you touched on something, Nick, that I was quite keen just to give the listeners a little bit more context on. I think for the most part, we're definitely in this AI boom. It's still pretty early days for a lot of it. And I think people are getting to grips with agentic development, LLMs, etc., what that all means. But there are very few businesses that speak quite as much as Seekr do around trustworthy and explainable AI. So I guess for some of our more junior listeners, potentially some listeners who aren't in the space, What does that actually mean?
Yeah, I think like trustworthy AI, it can mean different things in different contexts. And so for some products, a little disclaimer that says this may not be accurate, use with caution is good enough, and that's trust building. And the experience you have with ChatGPT or Gemini or the Claude app on your phone probably falls into that bucket. In defense and public sector environments, it means something really different. And human in the loop oversight, explainability, auditability, those things are non negotiable. It's our job to give people working in those workflows transparency and reliability they need in their application. And as I mentioned before, if you're going to do those things well, like the explainability stuff, you need to build them. You need to build your products with those in mind from the ground up, which is where I think we have a really strong position. Our view is that like AI ethics and explainability are expressed in the system design itself, like auditable decision trails, attribution across data sources, clear provenance on what data influence and output. All those are needed so you can trust the output of your AI and understand why your application provided the answer that it did. More specifically, like if you're using AI in a life or death situation or in a workflow that's a matter of national security, you have to be able to understand why your model is behaving, how it's behaving, and whether you can trust the output. And so we log every step an agent takes, every tool call, every parameter, and we surface traceability so operators can not just see what the answer was, but how it reasoned. We offer explainability workflows across every level of data that might be built into your AI application. And so it could be the base model itself. And so we do a lot of work around mechanistic interpretability to explain why an open source model might be behaving the way it's behaving and allowing you to have insights into kind of whether certain features are present or not present in that model. You could also fine tune those models using bad data. And we can also, by accident, of course, not on purpose, but if your model or your application starts outputting bad data, we can also identify if it's an issue with your training data. And then at runtime, and this is really an issue with agents, they are provided so much information kind of at that moment to go make a decision. And so they have the prompt from the user and instructions and a bunch of tool calls. So it could be a file search in a RAG application, it could be a web search, it could be a custom tool that you've built. And now you might have hundreds of thousands of tokens being fed to an agent to produce a tiny output. If you don't like the output, that trace is going to exist, and that's not something that Seekr offers uniquely. But with other tools, you probably have to go through that trace and go through hundreds of thousands of words to even just understand everything that the agent was provided. And then you also have to try to pinpoint what caused the response. And so we do attribution on all of that context that an agent's provided and all the different sources. We'll break it down at a sentence level if you'd like, and then we'll score how likely, or we'll kind of do some scoring that lets you know what part of the context caused the problem. That's all valuable to explain a problem, but now you might need to go contest it. And what's really cool about Seekr is we offer contestability tooling as well. And so if your application used a website that you don't ever want it to use again, you can shut it down as part of that explainability workflow. If there was a bad file being stored in your vector store, you can rip and replace that. Things like that. And so not only are you able to explain the data sources that caused the output, you also have the tools to make sure that mistake doesn't happen again. And what that ends up doing in essence is the more you use your application, the better it gets over time and the more trustworthy it gets over time.
Awesome. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a really clear explanation for people who may just be kind of coming into the space and trying to consider those concepts. I think we're very much still in a world where, as you say, there's very nominal transparency, and then also industries and potential use cases where that's a lot higher. And I guess with that being said, do you ever see that there's a trade-off between transparency and performance and speed?
I think maybe with respect to speed, if you don't bother doing any explainability or contestability, you can get an answer pretty quickly, but you probably can't trust that answer. I think as applications get more and more important and more deeply embedded into your organization, the need for explainable, transparent AI grows. And I think it actually removes a bottleneck. And so I think that ends up happening for a couple of reasons. And so I think it's certainly the case that as AI scales, the need for explainability scales exponentially. Okay, one reason is you need to obviously get the application off the ground. If you can't validate why it's important or why the application gave the answer it did, you can't use the application in many scenarios. And you sort of start limiting the use cases to which you could in which you can use that application. But it also gets exponentially more important as application scale for a few other reasons. The first is that applications tend to get a lot more complex over time. And so you might start off with a base model, like an open source model off the shelf that you're just using for inference. Over time, you might want to go fine tune that model so it's brand compliant or it uses your brand voice, for example. You might go then use that fine tuned model inside of an agent and give it access to a bunch of tools, right, to give it better answers and more real time information. And you might go retrain that model over time based on feedback your users are providing or whatever it may be. And so what started off as a simple off the shelf model in an extreme case could be a fine-tuned model that's been retrained, that's plugged into an agent with access to a bunch of tools, right? And so now like the complexity of information being fed to your application and all of the ways it's being fed in, whether it was part of that base model training or you retraining the model or customer feedback or agent tools, it starts becoming a harder and harder problem over time that you have to disentangle. Another issue is that over time, and let's assume that these applications are growing in usage as time goes on, which good applications tend to do, the data is going to drift. And so let's say you fed your agent some legal document or your terms and conditions or whatever it might be. It may be running perfectly smoothly in 2026, but by 2030, it could be operating in ways that are just completely non-compliant or even nonsensical or inaccurate, right? And if you don't have the ability to kind of find that 2025 set of terms and conditions or 2026 set of terms and conditions in 2030, you're in a really, really tough spot. I think another thing that happens is as these applications prove themselves, they start getting used in different contexts. And so you could end up with an application that was started for one purpose, but was just performant, and somebody started using it for another purpose. And so now you can end up with a super complex application with all those different components. The data could have changed, or the kind of ground truth for that application could have changed considerably, and it could be being used in a context in which it kind of wasn't originally built for. And let's say that application starts putting out those strange outputs. You can't debug that in the way that you normally would. Finding that bad data becomes impossible if you didn't build that or didn't build your application with that in mind from day one. And so I think that's a problem that the entire market is starting to bump into. And I think Seekrflow is really the only platform that's solved for it. A good CIO or a good CTO is thinking 3 to 5 years out. This is a problem they will bump into 3 to 5 years from now if they're not thinking about it today. And in those extreme cases where you don't understand any of the data that went into it and it's non-compliant and the people who built that application might have left, you can't debug it like you would with traditional software. And now you might need to go kill a mission critical application because it's non-compliant. And you sort of have to rebuild it from the ground up in the worst case. And you just have to cross your fingers that it's as good as it was before you have to deprecate it. If you build it with all these explainability tools in mind up front, you're in a really good spot down the road. Sorry, that was a heavy answer.
No, it's a good answer. I was just trying to digest it all. No, I think that's really interesting, and like, where I guess where we're heading in the future is super relevant, I suppose, to this conversation. I guess Nick, what I wanted to also just touch on was, I guess, leading this AI strategy at scale. And obviously, you talked right at the beginning of the podcast about your background working in some big tech companies. So I guess like you've worked in big tech, you've obviously worked more in kind of scale up environment, but you're still leading. This is still AI strategy at quite a big scale now, isn't it? I guess what have you had to like unlearn from big tech to then move into the scale up world?
My time at Amazon was terrific, and I don't think all the skills you learn at Amazon transfer over directly, but I got exposure to so many different things in a very short period at Amazon. So I was like the marketing lead, the worldwide go-to-market lead for Amazon Fire tablets. I got to see every part of an Amazon launch: pricing, packaging, PR, strategy, supply chain. AWS, I was product marketing and also led a bunch of AI products. I got to work in the internal incubator there, and I got to pitch all the way up to like Jeff and Andy. And then at Amazon Studios, I think that was the most formative experience I had very early in the AI boom. And I really led AI products at Amazon. I took a team from about 5 people initially to around 60 people when I left, working under a guy named Ben Stanbury, who was just awesome. One of the best experiences of my career. I learned most of what I know now at Amazon, and I really got to see what excellent looked like from a process perspective and got to meet some great people. What attracted me to Seekr, first and foremost, I think was not just the ambition of the company, but it was just the pace at which the organization was moving. And so, like, the senior leadership team was so impressive during my interviews, and they were so motivated to do something really difficult and really big. And I just got the sense that I could learn a lot from which at this, like, just from the speed at which the company was moving, and that's certainly been the case. And so we're tackling a very hard problem. We're doing it at lightning speed. It's been very fun and rewarding, and that's been a little bit different from my time in big tech. And so at Amazon, you have, these annual processes to get projects approved, and a good percentage of your time is spent necessarily coordinating with other business leads to, drive cohesive strategies across Prime Video and Alexa and AWS, for example, which is a lot of what I did when I led that big team. And that can be slow at times. It's kind of like the analogy of, turning a cruise ship instead of a go-kart. Seekr feels like a go-kart, and it is a go-kart. And if me and the president and the CTO feel really excited by something, we can start moving on it that day. And I guess that's been something I've had to kind of relearn or unlearn. That was a little different in a big tech environment. I think the other thing that really attracted me to Seekr was just the stage of the company and the fact that we were in a full scale up mode, and I would get to lead like the full product suite at an organization that was growing really fast. And that's been a great opportunity. It's a much more agile environment than big tech, and there's a lot more autonomy over decisions, which is great. And so day to day, that means spending a lot more time with operators and customers and mission owners than with slide decks, getting to sit with them, getting to understand how decisions really get made. And then my favorite part is very quickly mobilizing the team to turn those insights into shippable products and capabilities for those customers. Like, speed matters in a hyper competitive space. And so the motivation to join Seekr was really about moving fast with a lot of autonomy. That's been a change from the environment I was in before, and it's been pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm sure Ty can testify to your kind of latter point, when he's speaking to, sort of prospect, hires for you guys, and the stage you're at, it's just obviously a very exciting opportunity, isn't it? And I guess sort of linked to that, have you noticed a big difference in product culture, from like that big environment versus smaller? I'm talking about, like, I guess how much time you spend with customers, or the breadth of product strategy you're able to do. Is there a noticeable difference there?
I think just with the size of the company, you have to think much more holistically about execution at a place like Seekr. And so when I was at Prime Video, it was very much about introducing AI into studios' workflows. I did not interact very frequently with the folks, dealing with talent management, for example, or union negotiations. And so there's parts of the company that are just almost abstracted away from you, and you can just get very focused on your role without a whole lot of context, which is fine. Those conversations are probably happening at a SVP level and wherever they need to be happening at certain times. With Seekr, it's every decision is just so cross-functional. And so working with sales, marketing, finance, technology, et cetera, on every big project we're doing, and thinking about it from a complete company perspective, I think it requires a different culture and a different strategy to succeed. And so setting a vision, I think, is more important here than in any other job I've worked. And so we are AI for mission owners in critical environments. We will be the best at that. Like, we will be the best solution on the market for explainable, contestable AI. And making sure that everybody understands where we're pointed is deeply important, especially as we're in this grow phase. I think Prime Video is probably at a point where they're going to be fine no matter what. Seekr still has, and the market is sort of set. Like, Seekr is a growing company in a growing market, and we have to be very, very deliberate about what we're doing. So that's really important from a culture perspective. I think also just turning us into more of a product-led company has been important at Seekr, whereas at Amazon, that wasn't. Sometimes some organizations were product-led, others weren't. But for me here, that means having product being the driving function for a lot of other activities at the company. Our sales team needs to know exactly what we're working on, when it's going to be delivered, and what's next so they can sell the right things to customers and also be sure that we'll be able to keep the promises that they're making. Our marketing team has a calendar of releases and they need to know whether timing still makes sense and why our product is better than what else might be there and what problem our product is solving. How that manifests for me is super active communication. I encourage that at all levels of the organization, and not just at the product organization. I want individual sales reps reaching out to me if they have questions. We're making sure that we're constantly sharing information so other people can do their jobs confidently. Beyond the specific things, though, I think there are elements of culture that apply everywhere. And so, like, the ability for a product function to process large amounts of information and distill what's important is important in any product org. Massive empathy for your customers. And maybe that's the Amazon in me coming out, but I think that is the most valuable skill a product leader can bring to the organization. The ability to manage short-term impact versus long-term impact and to make those trade-offs. And sometimes short-term impact is more meaningful, and you have to be able to, really sit with hard decisions and immediate revenue versus product growth. And then I just think the most important skill in general, whether it's startup or big tech or product or any other function, is just the ability to work as a team member to achieve a larger goal. Like something a professor said to me in business school, which I loved, was just like, business is kind of like football. It's like you have 12 people or 11 people on the field, and like everybody kind of needs to do their job to even have a shot at it. If one person screws up their assignment, the whole play can fall apart. And kind of the only way you succeed is if everybody's working in unison. And I think that's been my experience. It's just not an individual sport at all. Kind of all that matters is a big group of people going and achieving a goal. And I think just being a team player is the most important skill you can have.
That's awesome. I think that's like super important context for a lot of PMs out there. I mean, we speak to a lot of PMs that move from big tech to startups or scale up and vice versa. And yeah, I mean, I guess like the way you speak about it there is that like there's a lot of transferable skills, but there's also a lot of lessons learned. And it kind of sounds like it's good to experience both sides of the coin to be the coin, right? Which is awesome. And I guess that kind of like leads quite nicely into a question I had, Nick, which is just more broadly around kind of how you've seen product management and the role of a product management change in this AI era. Like an example, I speak to a lot of product managers who talk about Claude Code and how they use Claude Code and they're tapping into coding themselves. And I think 5 years ago, there was a very small pool of product managers who were thinking about the engineering tech side in the way that they are today. That's one example from like a recruitment perspective, but it'd be really interesting to kind of understand from your experience, how, given you've been in the space for as long as you have, how you've seen that change.
I think a really important thing here is just setting big goals and setting ambitious goals. Like in AI, you have the opportunity to do really big things right now, and there's a lot of space where you can get things done and create a blue ocean for yourself. And so I don't think you should be shy if you're working on an AI product. There's a lot of opportunity out there. To your point, Ty, I think embracing new technologies and integrating them into your workflows is key. And I don't care if you're a product manager or product leader, it's important to embrace that change. And so like we leverage AI agents across our entire technology team to speed up our development. That includes back-end development, front-end development, design, or even just having PMs vibe code a solution to gain a more intuitive understanding of a problem. Like if you don't embrace those tools early, you're operating well below your capacity as a product leader, and you're probably pulling your company down, or as a product manager, you're probably pulling your product down. And at a personal level, like you risk being left behind and having the market pass you by if you're not part of that change. I think another really important thing for product managers in AI is taking the time to empower your go-to-market teams. And these are technical products, they're new capabilities, they're very nuanced, and the folks who might be on the front line selling the product, they don't have the deep nuanced conversations with the engineers and scientists all the time. And so taking a moment before meeting with them to understand the right level at which to present things, and then just constantly giving them the information and like the why buys and the value prop to kind of sell what you've built is super important and probably one of the best things you can do. Like you can build something incredibly useful. But if your go-to-market teams don't understand it or how it works, they won't be able to communicate the value. You won't get the revenue, and you're putting your product at risk. So I think it makes a lot of sense to take the time to communicate with those teams and communicate at the right level.
Great point there, Nick. I think the other thing we wanted to touch upon as well was just around kind of a bit around hiring, I suppose. I guess maybe this is more of a conversation where Thai can kind of chip in, from his perspective. So I'm not recruiting quite so much into the US. But I guess what differentiates like these top product managers that you're hiring at Seekr versus I guess like the top 10% versus the rest. What kind of skills have they got? What kind of attributes have they got? I know you kind of touched upon it a little bit already, but and I suppose this is more for the perspective of people listening to this podcast and wanting to be in that kind of top 10%. What kind of things do they need to be pitching, I suppose, with their experience?
Well, I think Ty and the team have just done an awesome job of finding a bunch of product managers we're super thrilled with. Ty, maybe you can start and I can add on, but I think you have a pretty good feel for it.
Yeah, cheers, Nick. I think, to be honest, not to take an easy route out, but I'd kind of just echo some of the things you said, right? Like, I think for me, what I'm trying to ascertain is how curious are you? How forward thinking are you? How, as you put it, right? Like, obviously, most product managers I speak to have aspirations to become a lead at some point in time. So you're a product manager today, you want to be a leader tomorrow. What are you doing to think like a leader now? So when you are the leader, your mindset is already one which is unison with the business and pushing the product forward. Are you curious about new technologies? What are your thoughts on Claude Code? Have you tried it? Do you vibe code? Do you not? And, everyone's different. Some product managers I speak to don't want to be as sat at the forefront, shall we say, and some I speak to really want to get there. So I also think there's like some characteristics and some traits that are necessary. Like, it's that old anecdote that there's 100 people, there can only be a top 10, right? And the other 90, some of those might not want to be in the top 10, which is also fine. So I think it's that. And then I also think it's following the trends. Like, I think we're increasingly in a market where tenure is important, but it's probably not the most important thing if your moves are in line with the evolution of the market. So, if you can be at a business for 2 years or so and probably see a product cycle through and maybe even an iteration of that product cycle beyond that, and your reason for leaving after that 2 years is because you jumped on to a different wave to do something new and try something. I think now more so than kind of pre-COVID, those reasons are ones that are listened to and probably even admired a little bit. Whereas, before, so post-COVID, whereas pre-COVID, it was very much, hey, what do your tenures look like? Have you been in a business for 5 years? And if not, probably don't want to speak to you. Maybe one of the only silver linings of the pandemic, other than the fact that we had this AI boom and now people can work from home a little bit more. But yeah, do you have anything to add on to that, Nick? What do you think?
No, I think that's spot on. I think curiosity, willing to dive in, strong people skills, strong technical skills are, I think, all captured in what you said. One thing I look for is just the ability to communicate at different levels. Like it's sort of this hub between all these different spokes of information. And so being able to communicate a highly technical feature to your sales team, which I just talked about, or being able to go back to your technical teams and explain a requirement that a customer has in a way that they can sort of process and break down and execute on. And then also just how quickly do you build trust? It's a tough thing to gain in an interview over 30 minutes, but it's something we certainly poke at. I think those are really big drivers of success for product managers. And so can I understand what you're saying? Can you communicate at different levels? And do I get the sense that you could work well with other people?
I echo that as well. I think it's I guess suppose the question I kind of opened up with, Nick, what's the problem space you're working in? What's the product you're building to address that? And who's the customer? If good PMs I speak to, if you can explain that to me, and it's something really complex, but I can understand it, then that to me is usually it's a good starting point, right? That you're a good communicator and have those you have to have some of those attributes. You talked about you both talked about like the having strong technical ability as well, and I think that's probably a given for for a company like Seekr. It's interesting hearing that like versus the UK market, because I think that it's pretty different over here in quite a lot of cases. There's obviously businesses where there are where that technical level isn't needed quite as much. I think that's maybe something that's born out of just generally, people in the US go to uni. If you want to be in tech, you go and do a computer science degree, and then you either become an engineer or a product manager. So there's a lot of other options, right? Whereas I feel in the UK, not so many people go and do a comp sci degree at uni, and then they end up in tech and they end up in products. So I think it's maybe just like a cultural thing, potentially, and how universities work and colleges work. But no, I think it's. I guess I suppose maybe a question off the back of that: do you ever consider people who haven't got those kind of core technical capabilities, maybe more of a generalist or someone more of that kind of strategic commercial end? Like, would that work for you in some cases?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you don't need to be able to go in and you know train a foundation model from scratch necessarily. If you can, hey, we'd love to hear about it. But I think it's such a multifaceted discipline, So you do have to go dive into the weeds sometimes and get technical with your science and engineering teams, but you also have to go essentially be the best salesperson for the product that you're building. And you also need to be able to communicate it really effectively with marketing. And you also need to synthesize a lot of information. And so, um, absolutely, we take chances on PMs who don't have those technical skills. If they're, again, to Ty's point, curious, they show an aptitude to learn, they're excited about the space, and they seem like they can work well with others. And so, some of the best PMs I've worked with have come from non-technical backgrounds.
I mean, I guess just to kind of like transition the conversation slightly, we've spoken quite a bit about forward thinking and, one, in this AI era we're in, that's a necessity because, as you put it, Nick, if you don't consider what the next 5 years look like, you can run into a whole host of issues when you get there. So I guess with that being said, what would, if we were to fast forward 5 years down the line, a successful Seekr look like?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I think we would be the dominant player in every one of our target verticals. I think you would see um, continued revenue growth. And to me, that's just a signal of customer value. I think you'd see penetration into every aspect of the government, and just continuing to double down on enabling those workflows. I think a bigger office in Austin would be great. I'm not sure, honestly. I think we're in um, like the second inning or the third inning of like a 9 inning game, so it's difficult to predict where the whole thing ends up. What I do feel really confident in is the need to explain the outputs of these probabilistic solutions. That's only going to become more and more important over time. I also think the use cases for which people use AI will continue to grow in importance. I also think that new modalities are becoming kind of intertwined and quite interesting. And so this isn't just chat anymore. There's audio, video, describe this image, explain this video. There's going to be a lot more applications built around that. And then something else that we're seeing is the need and ability to process more information than any human could ever possibly process. And so, like, you guys might have seen the beta release of Seekr Geo, which is taking all of this overhead data, and thousands and millions or hundreds of thousands and millions of images and distilling insights from satellite and hyperspectral and SAR data for these mission owners. There's no human in the world who could look at 100,000 images and tell you what's happening across those. And if you start breaking that into teams, you start getting fragmented decision making. And so I think like the large scale processing of this vast amount of information is going to continue. I see Seekr being a major player in all of those trends that I'm going to continue to bet our direction on. And so how it looks at the end of the day, I'm not sure, but lots of happy customers and lots of growth, we hope.
Super interesting. And I guess just final one from me, again, a little bit more of a forward thinking one. I've waited right till the end to try and really test you, Nick, so apologies. But I guess if if you could foresee any risks around the space, what would you say they might be?
Um, I think our job is to foresee the risks in the space. And so the main risk I see is that folks are building applications without a long-term plan on how to maintain those applications. And it's going to limit the context in which those applications can be used. And like really what you want to see, like if I'm investing millions of dollars or more into an AI application, I kind of want to, it gets better and it improves and more people use it and you kind of get this hockey stick. If you start running into those data issues I described earlier, where you can't track down bad data and you can't resolve data that's drifted, it'll sort of go up and then come back down. And so if you want that exponential growth, you need to build for this now. I think that's the biggest risk, and it's our job to help companies solve against those risks. And that's what I'm working very hard on. And so I don't think every company has bumped into this yet. I think like a few years ago, we were in this space where it was just this new technology and you could generate all of this sensible text and people just wanted to learn about it. And then they wanted to see if there was an ROI there. And then people started thinking about, let's say really for the last couple of years, the long-term life cycle and financials of these applications, where do they run, what's the most efficient way to do this, is our model right-sized, et cetera. I think people are really starting to bump into this risk management part of the curve right now. And it's the biggest thing I'm bumping into, and I'm very happy we have products against it. Yeah, I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but that's the one you get.
It's a great answer. I don't think there is a right one there. And I mean, for what it's worth, I would agree, but my knowledge isn't as extensive as yours.
I think that's probably, but we touched a lot of the points we wanted to touch there, I think. Nick, any final thoughts from you on anything you wanted to add at all?
I feel great about the conversation. I thought we got to dive a lot into obviously Seekr, but product management and product leadership and what makes a good product leader and what makes a good product hire. And I hope all that was valuable. I enjoyed talking about everything quite a bit.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. I think they're very valuable. Definitely some interesting insights. Having not done much work with Seekr at all myself, it's incredibly interesting space. And Nick, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast as well. And I'm sure that our audience will appreciate it hugely as well. So thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Nice. That's it for this episode of Product Leaders.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you found the conversation useful and maybe picked up something you can take back into your own work.
If you enjoyed it, make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
And if there's a topic you'd love us to cover or someone you think we should speak to, let us know.
You can also check out previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. See you soon.